lights fade, the curtains rise. New stories waiting behind our eyes. Charlotte and John with the final say, breaking down the screens in their own way. This is the final cut, where the real review.
It's been unreachable for decades. You can never touch this thing with your skin.
It needs to be destroyed before the devil finds it. Brooker, where did you get this?
You're having trouble processing what you saw.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Final Cut podcast. Now, if you've been a regular listener or indeed viewer of our podcasts, and including the video podcasts before, you'll have noticed that we've interviewed a lot of people from Hollywood, or people that have worked in and around Hollywood. But today we're going to change things up a little bit and interview someone who works outside of Hollywood, still based in the United States of America, but very much choosing to work out of the state in which they were born and raised. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Brandon Ransbottom, who's a filmmaker, writer and producer who has worked on a number of projects since graduating from Florida State University Film School a few years ago. And Brandon's latest project is called Brooker, a feature film that he made independently outside of the Hollywood system and that is due to premiere this year in 2025. It's shot in Tampa Bay with a largely local cast and crew. So welcome, Brandon, to the Final Cut podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, lovely to see you and to meet you. So first question, really, Brooker, tell us about Brooker. What's it about, and how did you go about making it?
Sure. The easiest way to describe it, and we've said this many times, is that it's Indiana Jones set in the state of Florida. Yeah, what that means for us is that there's a relic hunter, Marshall Brooker, and he is sent on a mission to find an ancient relic. Said relic has supernatural properties, and where maybe the movie takes a little bit of a twist compared to other movies in the same genre, instead of turning it over or somehow that leading into the, kind of second act of the film, he determines that he's going to hold the relic ransom from the buyers. And, assuming that he can kind of, cheat the system, so to speak. And so the movie really becomes about the juxtaposition between those in power and those in not, between the ancient side of Florida and the more neon Disney-esque side of Florida. And, these kind of very disparate ideas of reality are kind of crashing in around this ancient relic.
Okay.
So can I ask then, so Brooker is described as a relic hunter adventure, and you said you had inspiration from Indiana Jones, etc. And there's some supernatural elements, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
What was the seed of where did you get the idea to start to write the film or create it?
Sure. Well, and to be honest, when we were working on the film, the real impetus for making the film was, okay, we have all these passionate filmmakers, people that primarily have worked in the commercial industry, working on, big projects for national brands or small businesses, run the whole gamut of things. And we knew we wanted to do something narratively based. And what we did, me being the writer, what I did was I took a sheet of paper and I wrote down, what do we have access to? And we wrote down all the resources between, who do we know that owns a bar? Who do we know that works at a school? Who do we know that has, a cool car, right? And we wrote down all these things. And then I kind of drew a line out from each of those and I said, like, okay, is this a setting or is this a MacGuffin? Is this a plot device? and then from there, almost kind of in a very logical progression, the story kind of evolved from that. So, I would love to say that I had some muse that inspired me, but in reality, this project was, we really wanted to demonstrate the skill sets of all the filmmakers involved, and I was able to kind of bring the apparatus around the movie by, pulling from resources I knew we had at our disposal.
Mhm. Yes, and what I find interesting about it is that, you hear a lot about people maybe making art films independently of Hollywood, but this is really a mainstream feature with commercial potential that nevertheless is being made entirely outside of the Hollywood system. What are both the gains and the drawbacks of that? Could you maybe take us through the gains first of all, and then discuss a little bit about the drawbacks?
Sure. I think in any independent project, the biggest gain or the biggest really draw for a creative person is that you have creative control. In this particular case, we were able to raise all the financing independently. We didn't even really have traditional investors involved. So, Final Cut rested with myself and the director of the film, Gary Miller, and between the two of us, we had freedom to make the decisions that we felt were appropriate for the film. We weren't beholden to any studio. I think the drawbacks of it, the biggest one I think that I've heard from people that have seen the movie, and gotten a lot of great feedback. But if there is a hey, next time think about this,
Mhm.
that is, I think that our actors did a fantastic job in the film, but there's not a lot of known names and known faces in the film. And a lot of feedback from people that are in the industry is that, hey, that's how you're going to sell the movie, right? Is like you need to have these names attached. Now, certainly time will tell if they are correct in that assumption. My personal feeling is that, we're at a very interesting crossroads between the streamers and people's willingness in the American um, audience to consume media that is either it could be captioned, it could be dubbed, between successes on Netflix with like Money Heist and all these shows that aren't even they're not faces that they know, right? And sometimes they're not even being in a language that they can speak, and
Mhm.
there's still a willingness from the audience to just take on a great story. So, our film is in English, it's produced in America. Um, and so I'm interested to see if we can kind of tap into that same willingness, especially with a genre type film, which a lot of these, successful movies from overseas, from an American audience perspective, often are genre, whether it's Squid Game or something like that. There is this willingness, I think, to accept storylines that don't feature, famous Hollywood actors. But time will tell if that theory holds up, or if, on our next project we need to pursue, a more mainstream actor.
Mhm.
Yeah, you mentioned then that you did hire a local crew. So, however, then there must also been benefits to have, I can just imagine there's a few benefits to having local crew, and also, yeah, I mean, you could talk about the challenges as well, but there must have been benefits as well of having
Yeah, I mean,
people you knew.
the local crew it was kind of imperative to getting the film made, to be honest, because and again, this is my perspective, and this is what I've told many outlets around
Mm,
here. All the famous people that work on films come from somewhere, right? It's not
Mhm.
like there's some magical place that we get all of our talent from. Like people come from all over the world that are great at things. So there's really no reason why people in Florida can't be fantastic at what they do. Realistically, yes, like it can make sense to source somebody, to like seek out a particular talent to fill a role. And, as I said just a minute ago, we may do that next time for some, filling in some talent. But a lot of that is really a lot of that is more of the business side of things, so to speak, not to be too crass, but I think from our crew's point of view, or my point of view about the crew is that they were all fantastic. There wasn't
mm,
really like we found everyone that we needed. The only two crew members that that weren't local were the director, Gary Miller, and he brought on a DP, Andrew Robinson, that he works with in Kentucky. And I knew Gary from Kentucky when I used to be his producer up there. So, that was a long-standing relationship, over a decade of work together. And when he brought Andrew on, he was like, "Look, this is kind of my partner in crime now. I work with him almost exclusively." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I don't know Andrew, but let's give him a shot." And it was great. It was such a benefit to the movie. And those two guys technically weren't from the area, but I would say by the end we had really, formed this very cohesive bond with the 90% of other people that I can drive to their house from here. And that's, I think, as Hollywood decentralizes, as it is kind of in the mode of doing right now, I do think that, it makes sense for crews to kind of coagulate in other places in the world and form together, and we can really do some amazing things by, yeah, using the resources that are right in your backyard.
Yeah. Well, certainly we can attest to Florida and the fantastic locations. For those of you who are watching our video version on YouTube, you'll see that our background this episode is, I think it's Clearwater Beach, isn't it, Brandon? Just
I believe
outside
so,
Tampa
yeah.
Bay, where near where you filmed. So clearly, Florida has got it in terms of location. I was quite interested in the fact that while I think you have directed in the past, you chose in this case to write the screenplay and produce, but not direct. And as you say, you got in Gary to do that. Is there a specific reason why you sort of tend to stay away from directing?
Oh yeah, there's a myriad of reasons. I would say, the first and foremost is I don't know that I'm that great at it, and I think I'm not trying to pat my back by saying that I figured that out or anything, but I do think that there is a certain wisdom as you go along in your career to realize where your strengths are and where they are not.
Okay.
And I've done plenty of directing for commercials, but most of those shoots are, 3 to 4 days max. And a lot of times it's more kind of directing motions, like pose here, do this, hold this thing, open the door like this, than it is directing kind of emotional moments. And what I was finding on set, even, I mean, for Brooker, the decision to bring Gary on as the director was really kind of again, a logical decision because I knew, I'm basically being the production designer, the producer, the line producer. I'm the script supervisor. I'm also the writer on set. So I'm wearing a lot of hats, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'm driving and picking up props like while they're shooting. And I just, I just kind of could see early on, there's no way I can also direct actors and be present in the
Mm.
moment, right? In my mind. And so I talked to Gary very early on, months before we started principal photography, and I just told him, I need you. I need you to come and, bring your expertise of being a director. And I knew that was his passion, as a friend. I think that's kind of, this is maybe the touchy-feely side of things, but as much as Brooker was kind of a very calculated decision to make, for me, something that we really wanted to accomplish with it was to run a great set that, was full of compassion, that was full of respect for the actors and the crew. I really
Mm.
wanted to set, because I've worked on sets that aren't like that, and I really wanted to set that precedent of, hey, not only are people talented around here, but we also don't have to be maniacs to do
Mm.
this. Maybe you're a maniac for like thinking that you can, but I don't think you have to be a maniac in practice, of like at the end of the day, everybody, these are all people with families, and some of them have children, some of them have, people that they're taking care of that are depending on them, and so running them into the ground for 30 days straight or whatever it might be is really pretty vicious, in the name of art, quote unquote. And that's just like something I've never really believed in. I've always believed, there's no reason to torture anybody for these things. Like, we can be artists and we can do great work, but we can do it in a very functional workplace. And so Gary was a huge part of making the set a functional workplace.
And am I right in saying that I don't know if our research is correct, but you had your brother in it, is that right?
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, my brother Kyle Ransbottom, I've told many people he was the X factor in all of this because he used to work at Universal Creative, which is, if you've been to the Universal theme parks in
yeah.
Orlando, Florida, you've probably seen some of his work. He's worked for Disney. He's done incredible work, theatrical, stage design, and I think that the work that he was able to accomplish at the budget and the time that he accomplished it in is just phenomenal. I mean, I think if you look at the cave set in the film, which is kind of the primary thing that he worked on, or the mask that's also featured heavily in the film, that's the ancient relic. He designed those things basically on his own. I had so many other things I was focused on that I just kind of turned it over to him and said, "Hey, you take care of this. I'm just going to trust you." And that was the best decision. I mean, it's always been the best decision, honestly, with Gary, with Andrew, with my brother Kyle, with the actors, just finding the best people and trusting them to do what they need to do. Yes, you need to give them the vision, but if the vision is clear and they believe in you and they respect you, then having the trust of a respected person is, I mean, there's nothing better, right? And that's what Kyle achieved. He just went for it, and I couldn't believe it. The results, like when we walked onto the cave set, it was better than I could have imagined.
Amazing.
Well, certainly it helps when you've got a brother who's worked at Universal Creative and the theme parks. So well done.
Yeah.
Um, so the film has been shot. I think it was shot in about 21 days. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so how's it doing? How are you trying to get it out there? Because obviously one of the big issues that you have working outside of Hollywood is not having the distribution system of Hollywood. So how are you managing to distribute it and get it seen?
Right. And you were talking about benefits and drawbacks earlier. Certainly, and I think most independent filmmakers would, and maybe some people have different views on this, but I think one of the biggest drawbacks is you don't have the apparatus for distribution and marketing, right? I mean, really, at this day and age, like there are distribution models that don't need to function within the studio system, but if people don't know your movie exists, they're never going to watch it. And that's the battle that every independent filmmaker is fighting, is trying to find, how can I tell people that this exists? Every movie, even Hollywood movies, are trying to convince you to spend your 5, 10, 15, $20 on the movie, right? But, that's the battle that they're fighting. They know that he can put it in the theater. We're kind of fighting that battle and the battle of, do you even know what this is? Like, can I yell at you with a microphone and tell you that this movie has been made? The quality of it obviously is always decided by the viewer, but um, I think right now we're even in the stage where we're waiting on film festival submission status to see which festival we've gotten into. And I'm hopeful that I'm pretty sure that we will do well as far as being accepted into a lot of festivals. I mean, I think the movie was made with a lot of quality and care, and I think it shows on screen. It looks great, the sound is great, interesting characters, a great setting. So, just on a base level, I think that we kind of met all those markers that are kind of your baseline things. Um, but I've talked to a lot of filmmakers and been chatting up, alumni from FSU, and saying like, "Hey, what did you guys do? What's been your experience?"
Mm,
And a lot of the experience that I've heard from independent filmmakers is, and I mean, you see this. There's such a large number of movies that are featuring great actors. I mean, very big name actors that are coming directly to streamers or directly to rental. And so it's a hard market right now,
mm,
especially if you don't have those big names, and people are scrolling through and if they see Tom Hardy or something, and they say, "Oh, I know who that is. I watched that movie."
Mm.
Brooker doesn't have that, and we don't even necessarily have the hook of like a horror film. A lot of horror films can be done without as large of stars because the hook or the push of the movie is something that you can say in a sentence that is very provocative, right? Like there's this movie coming out called Good Boy that's like it's a horror movie from the POV of a dog, and that's a really catchy elevator pitch, right? Brooker is, to your point earlier, John. You know it's kind of a throwbacky movie that has, Spielbergian tendencies, and it's done in a classical Hollywood style. It doesn't really have an elegant pitch, Saying it's Indiana Jones in Florida is kind of a little bit, it's a simplification of what it is, and I can't claim that we have any of nearly as big of set pieces as you would have in that type of a film. Um, so, at the end of the day, with these distribution deals, that is something that would definitely help if we could find
Mm.
champions that could support that. But, on the other hand, we do have final cut of something, and I think maybe in the long run that could be more valuable than even having the distribution, right off the bat.
And in terms of incentive, so Florida, I guess, doesn't have many sort of statewide incentive, but so
Mm.
how did you go about finance then? Was it sort of local companies? Did you fancy no? How did you get the How did you finance
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. So, as far as financing for the film, yeah, there's not a lot of incentives in the state. There's a little bit of local, like county incentives,
Mm.
but and city incentives, but realistically, there was a lot of self-funding. I put a lot of my own money into the film. It was a lot of asking favors. It was doing some trade, like, hey, we'll film an advertisement for your business while, after we're
Mm.
done shooting or whatever. And even just like calling people out on social media, supporting in that way. And then just with the crew and the cast, just asking them to kind of believe in the process. And we did pay. I don't want to be misquoted here. I believe we paid just about everybody, like a daily rate, but we certainly didn't meet most people's the rate that they would normally ask
Mm.
for their work. And I recognize that, and that was part of the give and take was,
Mm.
read the script. Do you like the part? Do you understand how this could be beneficial to you? And then we've really tried our best to like be good about like turning over footage to people for their reels and
Mm.
working with talent agencies like, hey, like let's promote this. Let's find a way to like raise. We want the rising tide to raise all the ships, and I think that's important to me in the process of this. Like I don't want to just steal everybody's talent and then run away.
Sure.
I want to bring everybody up with us as we find success.
Yeah. So, following on from that, what it would be your ultimate ambition for the film? Would it be sort of being bought by Netflix or playing the film festivals? I mean, film festivals tend to be more in the art films, don't they? Although I think there are a few genre film festivals, aren't there?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we have some great positioning in some of the film festivals. We were trying to be very strategic about which ones we applied to. Both of that we would be successful, but also I think that we're reaching the audiences that will appreciate the film. So I think it starts with the film festivals, but the ultimate goal I would say for the film is, and I've said this from day one when I was writing the movie. This is a movie for an audience of one person, and that person is who's going to finance our next film. And
Mhm.
and I say that not as some kind of smooth business talk or something, but it really just to me, you know, there's going to be people out there like, filmmakers need financiers. And, financiers are a hugely important part of the process because, maybe some of them want to be filmmakers, maybe some of them fancy themselves directors or DPs or whatever. But I kind of think a lot of people that, want to invest in films are doing it because they want to see that movie, and or they believe in those people. Like I'm certainly maybe there's an expectation that there's some return on investment, but I think you could ask a lot of investors, hey, is there a safer way to make money than investing in films? Yeah, absolutely, right. There are some pretty surefire ways that you can invest money and you'll definitely get a return on investment. A film is like a total, shot in the dark, right? Is this going to be successful? I mean, as I noted earlier, there are tons of movies that feature huge names that are not successful or they're bombs or that, they get
Mm.
released and they're not even bad movies a lot of times. It's just, like there's 1,000 factors that go into whether or not it's a success. And so early on, I told everyone, I'm like, no matter what happens with the movie, maybe we sell it to a streamer, maybe we do, self-release where we, do rentals online and do it that way. Whatever it is, we're looking for that one person that sees what we've done and says, you know what, I want to take a chance on you guys for the next one. And truly, it's us as a team. Like I really would like to bring back as many people as possible for the next movie. Make the team a little bigger, maybe, add in maybe so I'm not doing production design or, being the script supervisor, but I think I want this to, it was a great experience. We had a lot of fun, and I think it warrants doing it again at least one more time, to make sure it wasn't a fluke on our end.
Yeah, I just wonder about that because what are you developing next? Any stories do you have in mind, or do you a
Oh,
similar kind of theme, or do you is there anything?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been working on a script, since we kind of wrapped photography last year. And actually, just recently, we were discussing, we once the movie was Brooker was finished, and we had a premiere locally, which was great. We had about 500 people come out to that, which was awesome. And people were like, "What's next?" Right?
Mm.
And well, one thing they asked, they're like, "When are you going to do Brooker 2?" And I was like, "Oh, that wasn't really on my radar. I
Mm.
really wasn't thinking about that." So that was encouraging. That's a pathway forward. Is if someone likes the movie and they want to see another one, we could
Mm.
do another one. Um, there's kind of so, but the main way I see it, the next project is like you can go bigger or smaller.
Mm.
And originally I was kind of going bigger, right? And maybe that was a little bit of me being naive, thinking, yeah, we'll do this movie, it'll be well received, and then we'll get more money for the next one. Now, it's only been a month since we kind of have really finished it, so I also need to probably cool my jets a little bit and hold the horses. But, I started having these thoughts of like, maybe what makes sense is to go smaller, to do
Mm.
something that does have a real strong hook that has like a shtick, it's like as Brooker doesn't necessarily have that. There's not like a one line pitch for it. We've been really working on can we develop a one line pitch for something that would be, very small number of actors in one location or two locations max. And, maybe your more traditional art house film, kind of showing that we have some range in what we can produce with our team. So, I think if we find some connections with people and they want to go a little bigger, we've got a script ready for that. But if we're not finding that by middle of next year, we're working on an idea now that we could just kind of jump right into with a little bit of funding help that I think we can find fairly easily.
Mhm. Well, good luck with that. I mean, I do get the strong sense that you and your team very much want to stay within the state that you were born and raised. There doesn't seem to be an ambition to go to Hollywood, for example, and to use this as a stepping stone to Hollywood. Would I be right in that assumption? And why? Why is it you want to stay in Florida?
Sure. Well, to be true, I'd love to shoot anywhere, right? That's for sure. And actually, I was born in Ohio initially, or not
Ah,
initially. I was born in Ohio,
Mm.
but I've lived here. I was just telling someone I've almost lived in Florida the same amount of time that I lived in Ohio. So
Mm.
I'm right on that cusp of like half and half. And so yeah, in a very real way, Florida is my home now, and I think. the reason that we, keep writing ideas around, a Florida location is because this is where the team is. And, you know, I I definitely think the team could leave the state and we could go somewhere else, but that completely depends on funding, right? And
Mm.
I've written, I probably have 10 or so scripts in the hopper that are different levels of completion, probably like three or four that are completed, and none of them take place in Florida. So, I do have ambition to, make films that are outside of Florida, but I also think if you want to do something, it's silly to try and do the version of it that's like 30 years from now. Like if you want to be a basketball player, right? You don't like show up to like an NBA tryout, your first time picking up a basketball. Like that doesn't make any sense. You need to get out on the pavement and practice, practice, practice and shoot hoops and, play in middle school and high school and college and you've got to put in the work. And I think that for us, for me, especially, like that's where we're at right now. Like we've got a lot to prove. And, I think that there's plenty, like Florida as a setting works really well. There's a lot of dynamic looks and feels here. And so, instead of spending money trying to go somewhere else to meet a story that's set somewhere else, let's just set it here, and that takes out a whole layer of complication and stress. And we can still do great work, right here. And I mean, to be frank, there's not a lot of people making Florida films,
Mhm.
so it's not like it's a completely crowded, market where we kind of have the run of it a little bit right now.
Mhm.
That's a good idea. I myself shot a film in St. Andrews and I was living in St. Andrews, so was a way I also showcase St.
Yeah.
Andrews. However, if I can make you dream a bit, so if you did have unlimited funding, what kind of film would you want to make? Scale, genre, location. What would you like to make?
Sure. Well, if I could do anything, what I would do is adapt Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. That's by far my favorite book series of all time. And there was a film that was produced, now it's almost been 10 years ago with Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey. And I was not a fan of it at all. And mostly because knowing the book series, I just was like, this isn't meeting my level of expectation for this story. And it's just a story that I love. And if someone's not familiar with it, it has some horror, but it's a Western and it's sci-fi and it's fantasy. It's all these things kind of wrapped up into one. And I've told many people over the years, like if I was ever in the position to just generate something, anything of any size, that's absolutely what I would. I think you could spend the rest of your life adapting that world because there's numerous novels and short stories, and it's just a playground that you could just continually go back to, and I think would be endlessly satisfying for a filmmaker or a creator of some kind. So I think that yeah, without even thinking about it, that's what I would do.
Well, you never know. There's always the chance that Stephen King might be listening. Who
Hey,
knows? Who knows?
let
Hey,
me.
um,
Yeah,
can I take you now to the sort of wider industry picture? Because what's interesting about you is you're a living example of kind of decentralized filmmaking, the way in which traditionally you had your centers of film power in the UK. That was where we're from, Elstree Studios in London. Obviously in the United States, Hollywood. But here we are in the age of big tech and disruption. I mean, it's making headlines, for example, that we might have our first AI actor signed up by a talent agency, if you saw that news
yeah,
story.
Tilly Norwood.
Yeah, Tilly
yeah.
Norwood, cut glass English accent, apparently. So what's your own take about the wider industry? Do you and your colleagues in some way represent the future of filmmaking, i.e., that the future will be everywhere rather than just in a few centers of power?
I think that aspect of it is very true. I think, it makes sense just in the world that we live in. I think it's hard with the really the biggest thing is the means of production coming down, with cameras and the newer cameras need less light to expose a good image, so the lighting is getting smaller and it's getting more powerful and smaller housings. And so with all these things, it's just easier for more people to make great content in that way. So I do think it was always going to become decentralized. I just don't think there was any way to like gatekeep that for very long, right? And certainly, there is a certain nostalgia, and maybe I even have a little bit of sadness for seeing, what may or may not be happening in Hollywood as far as, it being this kind of mecca for these, so many creative, awesome people, including some people that I know, that I've gone to school with and I have relationships with, and I certainly don't want to see them not succeed. However, I do think that I think there are some wheels turning in the world that are just way bigger than any of us, and I don't think it's going back. I don't think you can like put the cat back in the bag, right? And you mentioned AI. When it comes to that, I'm very curious and I'm a little cautious in, how is this going to be utilized, right? In a way, and maybe this is, pontificating a little bit or puffing myself up, but I do think, you know, we could be, as filmmakers, we could be kind of one of the last lines of defense of protecting the integrity of human art, right?
Mm.
Because it's very easy for a computer to generate an image, right? So like a painting, a photograph, or whatever. It's very easy for a computer to generate music, probably not good music, but I've heard the simulations of things that computers have generated, right? And so, there's just so much it's kind of in the system already, right? And so it's easy for computers to do that. It's still fairly hard for a computer to generate an emotional performance from something that looks like a human being.
Mm.
And I'm not going to sit here on a soapbox and say that that's never going to be possible, but my hope is that humans always do it better. And time will tell. Maybe I'll just be, some relic from another time, shouting out to the darkness, and the computers are making movies for each other or something. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but my hope is that, we as a society that, that does value looking into a human face, right? Like I think that's kind of that's really to me what movies are about is like, yeah, I love genre movies and I love like creatures and monsters and interesting things happening, but all of those things matter because at the end of the day, there's a human being that you cut to and you see what their response is to that
Mm.
thing, right? And if we get to a place where it's indistinguishable between a human doing that and a computer doing that, then I don't know. Then I guess I'm wrong, and I guess we need to just like reevaluate what movies are. But I do think that there is, and I'm not on social media, so like I don't even really get into like the kind of short form content that exists. Like I think that world is going to be heavily influenced by AI
Mm.
things because it just is faster and cheaper. But I don't know. Again, working on a movie and seeing the power of a good actor doing something, I guess maybe I'm naive, but I just believe that that still has power and that that is better than something that a computer can generate. But we'll see.
No, that's very well said. No, and it's interesting. But I guess we all have to wait to see what the future will
Yeah.
be like.
Yeah. Maybe not
However,
too long. I don't know.
can I ask you a question that we always ask is if you could have gone back and speak to your 21 yourself, what kind of advice, what sort of do you think you would have said to him?
Yeah. If I was talking to myself, yeah, I'm leaving high school or maybe even college. I think the biggest thing I would tell myself is, I had a mini revelation the other day. I was talking to someone and I felt like I was almost begging them for like, like please help me with this movie, like please
Mm.
watch it or please, whatever, right? I was kind of in this position where like I didn't have the power in the
Mm.
conversation, right? and that's fine. Like life's not all about power. But what I did realize was like I know that I'm serious, right? And I think each of us, like whatever it is that we're serious about, that we're passionate about, we know that about ourselves. And I know that I'm serious about this and about making movies. And if someone talks to me and they don't realize that I'm serious, then I kind of almost like I almost have to view them as, well, then you're not a serious person
Mm,
to me. Now that doesn't mean like I don't treat them with respect or whatever, but what it means is like in the context of my career, I kind of, I mean, I guess you could put it simply like you just don't mess around, like if you want to be a writer, then you better be writing some books or some
mm,
stories or some plays or whatever it is, right? If you want to be making movies, you better be talking to every single person you can think of that's going to help you make a movie. Because no, if you want to make a movie, nobody's going to make it for you. If you want to be that basketball player, no one's going to shoot those shots for you.
mm,
You're the one that has to be doing the work. And the great thing about that too is, if you put yourself through the ringer a little bit and through the fire and you throw yourself to the wolves a little bit, you see what survives, and what survives is the thing that you should probably be focusing on. And you asked me earlier like why I didn't direct. I was like, well,
mm.
I've thrown that to the fire and that didn't survive, right? Like that desire that has, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes I think I want to direct, but when push came to shove and I was in the situation, I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do this." But I had no problem, people asking me questions about the script and about writing and like, can we
Mm,
change this aspect of it? That really excited me. So that's what I would tell myself, when I'm younger is like, just say yes to a lot more stuff. Just get
mm,
out there. Don't be so, don't worry so much about the comforts of, you're gonna have your whole life to like figure out how to be comfortable, right? If you're younger, just be doing the thing, be serious. And to me, seriousness has nothing to do with fun, like to me, seriousness is kind of unlocks the ability to be fun, because to me it's not very fun to be bad at something, you know? Like if you go out and you like if you like I said, if you want to be good at something and you're terrible at it, then that's not very fun. But if you can go and get serious and practice and grow your skill set, all of a sudden things that weren't fun are very fun. And I want my career and the career of all of, our teammates to be like that. Like I want them to have fun in what they're doing because they're doing it at such a high level.
Well, that is great advice for up and coming filmmakers, and I loved your idea of film as almost the last defense of the human. So thanks
Yeah.
very much indeed for this interview and bringing the human touch to life in Florida vis-a-vis filmmaking. So thanks ever so much, Brandon. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for
And
having
also,
me.
if people want to reach out to you, and also the film is being released hopefully soon now, and how can they get in touch with you? Should
Y-
someone want to get in touch with
Yeah.
you?
The best way to find out more about the movie, to talk to me, to talk to any of the filmmakers involved would be to go to brookermovie.com. We have an Instagram, but to be honest, if you message us from the website, you will get a response. So brookermovie.com is where we'll keep everything up to date there.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Of
Thanks.
course. Thank you.
This is the final cut.